The Manipur crisis is now entering its fifth month, and there have been fresh clashes even as a debate rages on about a fact finding report by the Editors Guild. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo story. The news coming in from Manipur continues to be tense. Thousands of protesters clashed with security forces over a barricade at the edge of Churachandpur, an area dominated by the Kuki community. Security forces had to resort to the firing of tear gas shells. You're seeing images of this most recent clash. The crisis in Manipur is now entering its fifth month. As I mentioned, the latest tension has been over protesters demanding that a barricade stopping their entry into the Churachandpur area be brought down. Eventually, tear gas shells were fired and the protesters were contained. In the meantime, a fact-finding report submitted by the Editors Guild, a report that was written over 4 days and was crowd-funded, has created a storm. There has been a police case registered against the Editors Guild that have approached the Supreme Court for temporary relief. In the meantime, a counter-report has been submitted that rebuts the findings of the Editors Guild. It has brought together a number of prominent professionals from varied walks of life, and today we'll be talking to one of them. Let me introduce on the program today one of the people who actually drafted this counter report to the Editors Guild report. We're joined by Dr. R.K. Nimai Singh. He's a former retired IAS officer. He's been a senior bureaucrat in the state. And as I said, he's one of the key authors of the counter report that has been submitted to take on the arguments that were made by the Editors Guild. Let me start, Dr. Singh, by welcoming you to the program and ask you to respond to what specifically disturbed you about the Editors Guild report. I know I've been through your report. You pointed out 2 or 3 things. You said some of the photographs were captioned incorrectly. You questioned why the cover image of the report was the wall of remembrance from the Kuki areas. In other words, you implied bias. You also spoke about a mistake that had been made where a hut that belonged to the forest department of Manipur was labeled a Kuki house. The Editors Guild has owned up to 1 or 2 of these mistakes. What leads you to call it completely biased and baseless, which is the language you've used?
Barkha, first of all, thanks for having me. One of the main reasons is that I love my state. I have served my entire life in the state. And from the 27th of April, I have been following the rising tension among the communities. We still could not find out the genesis of what happened. The hatred of the government turning into the hatred of the Meitei. How it has happened, we still do not know. Yes, we agree that the Kuki Chin group are not happy with the chief minister. It's fine. Let them target the chief minister. Why target the Meitei community? That dilemma is still there with us. But in this report, certain senseless, I should say, not only baseless, but senseless statement has been made, like calling the Imphal media as the Meitei media. Why make it into an ethnic media? Imphal-based media, people used to say the Lutheans media and all. Okay, fine, you identify with the place, but why? Because there are lots of Manipuris which are writing, Meiteis are writing for outside papers. And their articles were accepted and it is read by the entire country. So why make it into a tribal media or a Meitei media? Is very unfortunate coming from a very professional body which we have a very high respect. But so when you go through the report, many of the statements which have been incorporated are actually lifted from the propaganda of a certain community. It is that indicates it is biased. The mistake, they have owned 1 or 2, they have rectified it, and one of the worst is that the acknowledgement to the Indigenous Tribal Leader Forum, and that is not very proper for a body. and they have met for 2 hours. They own up to one or two of the mistake about one forest office burning on the third, which was indicated as the house of a cookie village. That they have corrected it. And another is the relation of their acknowledgement to the ITLF, because that indicates a certain amount of bias. So that indicates that it is absolutely, I should say, a childish in nature about the report. They want to do it in such a hurry that they have not consulted all the people which are relevant to them, particularly the journalist fraternity. They have met for 2 hours, the representatives of the All Manipur Journalists, All Manipur Working Journalists Union, Editor Guild of Manipur, and the Manipur Hill Journalists Union. Nothing was reflected about the discussion except for one paragraph. As a professional body of the journalists, I personally feel that they should have dwelled into how much difficulty and to sweep all the journalists of Imphal-based newspaper as a Meitei media is hitting below the belt because many of our journalists are writing for national newspaper. They are publishing it, and the national newspaper must have checked and cross-checked their reports before it was published. So to just
Yes.
blame it as a Meitei media is very, very unfair. They could have said Imphal media rather than aligning with a community. That is very, very unfair. And they have not touched anything about the journalist fraternity in Churachandpur. They must be facing the severe challenges which the journalists of Imphal is facing. That they have swept under the carpet. One
Yeah.
another reason is that I have been studying since the last week of April after the uh, this open gym was burned, which was supposed to be inaugurated by the chief minister. So what we are concerned is that yes, people of Churachandpur may be having a hatred for the chief minister, but why change the hatred for the government to the targeting the Meitei? That genesis we still cannot fathom. And here in this report, they made a sweeping allegations as if the Meiteis are involved. Meiteis was a target because one understands somebody, some citizens or the people not happy with the government. That is bound to happen. But why make it into a communal ethnic tension which lead to this
Let,
very
let,
severe violence? That was some of the reasons which we have drafted this rebuttal.
yes. In your
And
in your
see,
in your rep- what
for,
you have
for,
said, you have asked for the report to be scrapped, but do you, and I think that is your right, you have a right to argue and rebut them on ideas, but do you think the police case is the correct way? The Editors Guild is now facing a police case. Do you think, as a someone who served in government as a senior IS officer, do you really think that is appropriate, sir?
I also write for local newspaper. I also write for the Tribune sometime. It is not a correct step. Not only the journalists, but even the academicians who have against whom some FIR are filed. Academic work has to be challenged academically. Scrapping of the report is required because they have to redo it again to ensure they can do
Yes.
it, and they have to bring back their lost name because here in Manipur, when somebody speaks about the Editor Guild of India, then people say, "Oh, it's useless. It's a third rate." They have to bring back their former uh, respect and dignity. But to
So
file
you
an
believe,
FIR, I think
yeah, yeah, go ahead, go ahead, go
to
ahead.
file an FIR is to file an FIR, I think is a bit too much.
I appreciate your position because you're saying that you disagree with the report, you find it biased, you find it without credibility, you find it converting the hatred for Biren Singh government into hatred for the Meitei community, but you do not agree with the FIR, and that's That's very important because
Yeah.
we must not police arguments, and we must not police our disagreements. Now tell me, in this counter that you have written, you have also written that this impression that the Manipur High Court wanted to give scheduled tribe status to the Meitei community is wrong. Can you talk a little bit about this?
So unfortunately, this order of the High Court was misinterpreted. What the High Court has said is that in the operative part of the judgment, the High Court said is that you send a recommendation in response to the letter from the Ministry of Tribal Affairs. And while making the recommendation, you have to look into certain aspects as laid down as in the petition, which is basically the five conditions as which was laid down for recognizing any community as a scheduled tribe. In other words, what the Honorable High Court have ordered is that the state government, which is the first respondent to the court case, has to look into the five aspects. And when it comes to an understanding, when they firm up their idea, they can send either a negative report or a positive report. The High Court order doesn't say that it should mandatorily be a positive recommendation so that the Meitei can be listed in the scheduled tribe list. So there is a misinterpretation in the order of the Honorable High Court. And that is what we have mentioned in our rebuttal also.
Right. You have also said that you believe that the Mira Paivis have been misrepresented. Now, I want you to talk a little bit about this because I was on the ground in Manipur, and women, whether in the Meitei community or the Kuki community, in both communities, they're at the front line of protests. Now, in the Meitei community, we have seen the women sometimes clashing with the Assam Rifles. In the Kuki community, we have seen the women sometimes clashing with the state police. In one case, we saw women demanding that soldiers show their ID card. In another case, we saw the police being blocked from entering and the army being welcomed. I'm mentioning both communities because I have seen this happening in both communities. The women this is the video which you would have seen where they're asking the soldiers to show their ID cards. Now, why do you feel, or why do you say in your counter that the Mira Paivis have been misrepresented?
No, it is like this. They have cited an example of a Myra Paivi recording, which was uh, inciting hatred. See, Myra Paivi come from our society. There will be some people who are good, there will be some people who are bad. It is for the security forces also. That's why they're training and all. There may be some who are notorious. But one should not judge by the exceptions. One should judge by the overall. I will cite the example of the two ladies being paraded naked, which is condemnable, and the perpetrator deserves uh,
Yes.
the penalty as per the law. But nobody, I again repeat, nobody mentioned that who are the people who saved these two ladies, dressed them and handed over to the nearest Central Security Police post. It is the Manapadi or Nopok Sagmai. Nobody has mentioned about it. Then what about that all the perpetrators' houses were destroyed by the Manapadis? I am not for destroying a culprit's house. This mob justice, the so-called mob justice, is not for the 21st century. It should be there sometime in the 18th century. But the ill treatment of a lady is felt by the women folk of the Meitei community. Similarly, the Kuki community must have also felt about the alleged rape of a Meitei lady. So there are the majority of the Mairapadis are uh, not extremists, I should say, in their approach. They are more reasonable people. The conflict between the state police and the Kuki ladies and the state police and the Assam Rifle is basically because of the mistrust. And the mistrust is because of certain people only. Say you can't sweep the Assam Rifle under a single brush. There must be one or two. There are one or two, but examples are there with the fighting with the police where they have park their Casapil vehicles in front of the police station. All these are not done. If there is a misunderstanding between the police and the Assam Rifle or whatever central forces, they should talk over the table and finish it, not come out in the open. It's if I should use a very harsh word, I would say it is a stupid act of the senior officers involved. So the security forces they have to work together, and they are working together because this destruction, identification, destruction of bunker, apprehension of arms and ammunition looted. These are done together. So they are working together. Because of one or two units of the Assam Rifle, the name
Right.
of Assam Rifle has been painted with a black brush,
But
which
you,
is
but
unfortunate.
But sir, you would have seen the army twice issued a statement, very upset. They said we are operating without fear or favor. In one instance, the army had to release 12 militants because they didn't want to face off with women. The army doesn't have AFSPA cover in all parts of Manipur. So the army is really going through a lot of its own challenges, and I just want to put them on record. But to come back to the Editors Guild, you said they must scrap their report. So the basic counters are: one, that you believe a lot of the captioning of the photos is wrong; two, the Mira Paibis have been misrepresented; through three, the High Court order has been misinterpreted. You also say that the acknowledgement of the ITLF, which is of course the tribal forum, shows bias. Now, what is the way forward, sir? What is the way forward? I must ask you that in the end. What is the way forward?
No, they should scrap the report because it is based on hearsay. Once they say that they will not go into the genesis, then the first three, four pages are into the genesis, which is based on a single narrative. If they have gone into the narrative of both sides, it's okay. But they have gone into the narrative of only one side. See, for a person like me who have been studying this violence, I still could not find out the genesis. Why the
Yes.
hatred for the government has been turned into a hatred of the Meiteis. That is still in a dilemma. I'm still in the dilemma. What happened? Because I have got many Kuki friends who have studied together with me, which I still talk to over phone.
Yes.
I I have many people who have served under me and many people under whom I have served. Some excellent officers from the Kuki Chin community. But
Yes.
suddenly this distance has happened. So what we want is that because even when we studied for 4 months, when we still could not understand the genesis, a team which came for 4 days visited one or two places, then making a sweeping statement and making certain recommendations. That is not worth it. What the Editor Guild of India should do is that they should appoint a fresh fact-finding committee, go into all the aspects, visit more places. Even the Supreme Court appointed committee and even the Commission of Inquiry, which is appointed by the government in India, is still in the process because it is an extremely complicated matter.
Yes.
So to
Can I?
finalize a report on this genesis
Yes.
in 4 days is unacceptable.
I take the arguments you're making with respect. I have a last question of you. When I was reporting in Manipur, we met people from both communities: paddy farmers from the Meitei community, young boys from the Kuki community, all of whom have guns. And this is the most worrying thing, that civilians today have guns. We are seeing mortars, we are seeing handcrafted guns. The Kuki community members showed us a pumpi. The Meitei community villagers said we used to talk about rice and pineapples. Now we have to learn how to fire a gun. There are reports of police armories, and we saw this happening in front of our own eyes. There are bunkers, there are, rifle pits. How do we disarm the civilian population? Finally, last question to you.
There has to be an operation. The first thing is, Barkha, is that the security forces should stop either side taking pot shots on the other. because there were a comparatively, even though the situation is tense, there were comparatively peace. Then that was destroyed when three Meitei was killed uh, in Quokta. Then it went on. Then again, a sense of calm prevailed. And then there was a firing and ambush, and a farmer was injured. And again, the cycle of
Yes.
violence started. So the security forces, because we are also, see, you are living in Delhi. We are living here. See,
Yes.
ultimately, the arms which were looted and was in the hand of civilian is going to turn to us. So we are more concerned about the arms in the hands of civilians. We are very, very much concerned. But
Yes, sir.
in this juncture, to ask them to surrender the arms or for the security forces to conduct an operation and seize the weapon is going to be extremely difficult because they are going to protect themselves and their families and their village with these arms. So the first thing that is required is to ensure that both sides uh, abstain from firing
Un-
against each other. Here,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
there are villages in vulnerable villages which has been destroyed, but which can be resettled immediately if the security personnel and the state government and the central government takes certain amount of proactiveness. If these are resettled and if proper security is provided, that area will become peaceful because there is
Yes.
not a fight between two neighbors. The neighbors will come together, and within 2 3 years, they will develop their old friendship. So the first immediate requirement is to ensure that there is a no firing between the two parties, and only that can
Absolutely.
bring a sense of normalcy because the villages in the foothills are very very vulnerable.
Yes, I think that's an excellent suggestion that, especially in what are called the buffer zones, you have to ensure that villages that stand at the edge of each other's communities, that is where the arms are, and that is where the violence and the exchange of firing has to stop. Dr. Nimai is saying, I'm going to say thank you to you here, but I want to say I really appreciate
Can I just
this
add
con.
one?
Yes,
Barkha, can I add just one thing? I am
yes,
absolutely against the use of the term buffer zone and line of control. Can't they use
yes,
because this
correct,
is used when two nations are
correct.
at war. So can we
That's
use
right.
a more simplistic term like a neutral
Yes,
zone? Because
yes.
we are perpetuating a demand of segregation
I
between the
agree.
two
I
communities which have
agree.
lived together
I
for
agree. I
centuries.
agree. I agree. In fact, the language of war and battle has become so normalized that we've all started using bunkers and buffer zones and battle. And we must. And I'm glad you corrected me on that. I just want to say thank you and how much I appreciate this conversation because you have put forth your argument and your disagreement with complete civility, and you have also at the same time said the FIR is taking matters too far. So I really appreciate that, and I hope the Editors Guild pays heed to some of the points that you have raised, and you're able to have a debate in the public domain basis your experience of what's happening in Manipur. Unfortunately, the line to you wasn't very good today, but I hope our audience has been able to hear most, if not all, of what you have said. Thank you very much, Dr. Nimai Singh, for talking to us, and take care. We'll
Thank you very much.
talk
Thank
to you
you.
again soon. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.